Did you ever want to kill anyone?
No.
How about using a notebook to do it?
Still no.
Well, you've come to the right place to satisfy your internal struggles and your desire for potato chips as we dive into the well-known anime called Death Note.
Death Note is about a high school student, because Japan loves the high school aesthetic for some reason, named Light Yagami, who is also one of the most intelligent students at his school. He is sitting in class one day listening to the teacher give the usual lecture, until Light notices a mysterious object falling from the sky and landing onto the school grounds. After class, he finds the mysterious object and discovers that it is a notebook with the words Death Note written on it. He looks inside and sees the rules but doesn't take it seriously at first. He decides to take the Death Note and test it out to see if it actually works. Light targets people who seem to be criminals and kills them by writing their name into the Death Note. Light is also surprised by an appearance of a creature that is in his room, who is somewhat comedically terrifying to look at. The creature explains that his name is Ryuk, a Shinigami, also known as a Death God, thanks Ryuk, who is responsible for the Death Note's appearance in the human world. Light is stunned at first, but when he is confident enough in his new power, he believes he was chosen for the position as God. Ryuk tells Light that he is here to stay because it is his Death Note, and explains to Light that he is not chosen for the position.
I was just bored.
Oh, really, Ryuk? Is that the reason why?
Yes, do you need more?
I guess not. Despite knowing this, Light decides to become God of the human world, and begins setting off the events of creating this new world. Now, how do you fight such an opponent? How do you stop a person who leaves no trace of evidence at the scene of the crime? This is where L steps in. A council is being held to determine who is the culprit for these crimes, and how to fight against him/her. When all seems hopeless, someone suggests that L should be involved to help this case. Then a representative for L appears and establishes a connection with L that appears on a giant monitor. We learn that L is the world's greatest detective, solving cases that seemed almost impossible to figure out, and wants to join in on the action without anyone knowing his face or his real voice, to protect himself from Kira, which I will get to sooner in the story. L has determined where the location of the killer could possibly be, and asks for full cooperation with the Japanese police force. The chief is surprised by this and ultimately allows L on the case. L then decides to come up with a plan to prove his assumption on the location of the killer. Meanwhile, Light has been killing off criminals to jumpstart his enlightened placement as the god of the new world, and has established his name as Kira, which comes from the English word killer in a Japanese pronunciation. Then a news broadcast appears with a news anchor declaring his name to be Lind L. Taylor, wanting to end Kira for good. Light decides to kill Lind L. Taylor and falls for L's trap. The real L appears and declares that Kira fell for his trap, now knowing for sure that Kira is in Japan, and he will surely find him. Light is ashamed and furious that he fell for such a simple trap, but decides to go along with the game more cautiously. Both L and Light then swear to find one another and bring them to justice. Throughout the story, Light is constantly trying to figure out ways to avoid exposure and be as successful as possible without being discovered by L, while L is trying to make sense of the situations at hand with his form of intense deduction. It is like a chess game, each side losing and adding pieces to the board and making sure everything is in place at the proper moment to get rid of the opponent's pieces. It is a thrill to see both sides of Light and L's form of justice as they pursue to great lengths to stop each other from figuring important information about each other. You'd be surprised at what lengths this anime will go to show how serious each characters are about their goals. Light is a clever tactician who makes very peculiar setups to secure his placement as God. He is also so determined to become a god that he is blinded by his egotistically driven motives, and slips up on some occasions. L is very thorough on every intricate detail, but never has enough evidence all the time to prove his assumptions to reality. Since the viewer knows who Kira is, it keeps you on the edge of your seat, either rooting for Kira to become the new god of the human world, or L to stop Kira from his tyrannical reign over the human populace. Ryuk is also a key player in the story, despite not wanting to favor either side.
I'm just here for the giggles.
Right. He is mostly there for comedic relief, and as a secondary character observe the actions of Light, since he won't be leaving anytime soon.
See, I told you so.
I guess you did. Since he was bored with the Shinigami world, his observations of humans makes things more interesting. He can only be seen by Light, since he is the new owner of the Death Note, and can only hear his voice as well. Ryuk can also interact with the human world, such as eating apples that are given to him by Light in laying down on Light's bed. Oh yeah, he can also move through objects and fly,
which is a really convenient power for a Shinigami.
There are also a lot of rules involved with the Death Note, but I will cover those in a different video. These rules prevent Light from committing certain acts and makes the plot far more interesting and entertaining.
I also would like to say something about the Death Note.
And what is that, Ryuk? What really do you have to say about the Death Note?
Well, it's just that's a goofy book.
Is that all you got? Is that really all you had?
What do you expect? Everything? Just watch the anime. I have what I wanted to say in there.
You're doing terrible, you know that.
Well, fuck you. I think what's more interesting is my interaction with apples.
Ryuk, you really like apples, don't you?
Yes, of course I do, human. It's like cigarette and alcohol to you.
But I don't do any of that stuff.
How old are you?
Old enough to maybe do this stuff?
Whatever.
In terms of visually appealing animation, this animation represents a somewhat mixture of darkened colors and lots of shadows that appear throughout the show. The first opening has its mixtures of black and white overtones, but placing vibrantly opposing colors that suits each individual character's personality. Its grim placement of colors also portrays a picture of deceit, turmoil, and thrilling engagements between Light and L, showing two opposing sides looking for the same goal in a different way. Mostly the colors fit the thematic entrances of most of the characters, giving characters more lighting or more shading in important scenes. This has a lot of themes that can be related to religious imagery and use of drastically different colors. The colors on characters don't necessarily pop out, but do produce an effect that tells you who the character is and what they are going to be doing throughout the story. This anime is more story driven than relying on the animation to always give you a heads up on what's going on. But that doesn't mean that there are twists and turns around each corner. When you think the story has hit its climax, you would be surprised to know that there is more than you bargained for. Overall, this anime has a great narrative, characters with wild and varied personalities, and an ending that will rock you to the core. This anime is personally one of my favorites, and hopefully it seeps into yours as well.